The shouting started before I even stepped out of the truck. "Sir, this is private property," a voice barked from beyond my busted gate. "Funny," I said, "killing the engine. That is exactly what I was about to tell you." The woman stood there with her clipboard like it was a weapon, hair perfect, even in the wind. Behind her, two men in HOA polos were loading the last of my pine logs onto a flatbed. 30 logs, my logs. Hand-cut, debarked, and stacked last winter for the cabin I had planned to build myself. The air was full of diesel and sawdust, smelled like robbery. I pushed through the crooked gate I had built with my own hands 2 years ago. Wire mesh still strong posts splintered where a loader had hit them. The woman did not flinch. "You cannot be here during confiscation proceedings." "Confiscation," I barked. "You broke into my land and stole 30 grand in timber. That is theft." Her lips twitched into something between a smile and a sneer. "Sir, the Willow Bluffs Homeowners Association has determined this lumber was unlawfully harvested from our protected slope." "Lady," I said, stepping closer, "this is not your slope. This is my lot. 5 acres bought, surveyed, fenced, and recorded with the county." One of the men dropped a log, the thud echoing like a heartbeat. I caught the stenciled marking on the end, my burn seal clear as day. "Those marks match our environmental evidence," she said quickly, as if repeating a line she had memorized. I looked her straight in the eye. "You cut my cameras, broke my lock, and hauled my materials. That is not evidence. That is burglary." She scribbled something on her clipboard. "Any complaints can be filed through proper channels." "Yeah, I said, they start with the sheriff." She waved at the driver, and the flatbed rolled off tires, grinding through frozen mud. The last log bounced once before settling into the pile. I watched them go until the truck disappeared past the tree line, and then everything went quiet, too quiet. Just me, the torn ground, and the sound of wind moving through empty space where my dream had been stacked. The silence did something to me. It was not rage, yet not the kind that burns. It was colder than that. Like the moment before a storm when the air feels charged and the animals hide. I walked the property, slow boots crunching on half-thawed gravel-tracing tire ruts as wide as tractor paths. Whoever came through here was not sneaky. They were confident, like they owned the place. The wires from my motion cameras were clipped clean, not chewed, not torn cut. They knew exactly where to go. Professional, organized. By the time I hit the cabin, that cold inside me was turning to heat. I dialed the sheriff's department and kept my voice steady. Name, lot, number damage, estimate 30,000 in materials, signs of forced entry, no HOA jurisdiction. The dispatcher promised a deputy within 2 hours. I sat in the truck and waited, staring at the line of pine where the logs used to be. The deputy showed up right on schedule. A kid, maybe 25, good boots, tired eyes. He walked the perimeter, took pictures, and asked the right questions. I handed him receipts, invoices, delivery slips, even the GPS route from the hauler out of Kalispell. All clean, all legal. He nodded slow. "You are saying the HOA down the road did this?" "I am saying their name is on the letterhead of whoever took my lumber." He whistled under his breath. "They have been in the news before. Zoning fights annexations." Yeah. They like to push boundaries." We both looked at my broken gate. "Looks like they pushed the wrong one." He promised to file a report, but we both knew what it meant. No cameras, no witnesses, a long wait. When he left, the sun was dropping behind the ridge, turning the snow to blood orange light. I stood there until the cold bit through my jacket, then climbed back into the truck and sat in silence. The smell of pine sap still clung to the air. 4 days later, I thought I was finally getting my head straight when the letter arrived. No return address, just a plain white envelope with a neat embossed seal, Willow Bluffs HOA. I tore it open. "You are hereby notified that your possession of lumber unlawfully harvested from the protected forested slope east of Willow Bluffs is under investigation. Said timber has been confiscated as illicit material and reassigned for community improvement." I read it twice, then I laughed. A short, sharp bark of disbelief that turned into something darker. When it hit me what they were saying, that my timber bought with my money hauled to my land was now theirs, the laughter stopped. I slammed my fist into the hood of my truck hard enough to split skin. They were not just thieves. They were bureaucrats who thought a stamp and a letterhead could erase ownership. I cleaned my knuckles with a rag, sat down on the truck's tailgate, and stared at the horizon until the sun bled out. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The community center looked like every suburban church hall I had ever hated. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, folding chairs in perfect lines. I walked in 5 minutes early and still felt late. Every head turned. Men in polos, women with laminated name tags, the smell of cheap coffee and self-importance. At the podium stood Karen Stonewell, president of the Willow Bluffs HOA, self-proclaimed guardian of suburban decency. She tapped the microphone. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Holmes involved in the recent timber dispute. Dispute, I muttered. You steal 30 logs off a man's land and call it a dispute. I stayed standing at the back, arms crossed. Karen clicked her remote. Slides appeared behind her, blurry photos of a forest slope, then of my own lumber, stacked neatly beside some construction site. These trees were removed illegally, she said, and later concealed on private property adjacent to Willow Bluffs. I raised my voice. Adjacent. Try half a mile away across a creek. Karen's smile did not budge. Boundaries can be complex, Mr. Holmes. Our bylaws empower us to act swiftly in cases of ecological theft. Swiftly, I said. You broke into my lot, cut my cameras, and stole my property. That is not swift. That is organized crime. Gasps from the room. A man in the front row adjusted his glasses. Karen tilted her head voice, syrup sweet. Until we verify your documents, the materials remain in our custody. I stepped forward and dropped my folder on the podium so hard the microphone popped. Inside invoices, delivery records, logging licenses, even a signed statement from the foreman who had unloaded the logs himself. Every piece of that timber came from Pine Valley Harvest. Legal, paid for, delivered with GPS tracking. I can show you the coordinates. Karen did not blink. We will review and get back to you, she said, moving to the next slide like I was a fly on her agenda. A man near the front raised his hand. Karen, are not we already using that lumber for the new pavilion? Her eyes shot daggers. That is enough, Dennis. But the room shifted, uneasy murmurs, darting glances. They knew. So let me get this straight, I said. You accuse me of theft without evidence, trespass on my property, steal my lumber, and start building a monument to yourselves with it. Karen smiled again, thinner this time. Everything will be resolved properly. I suggest you cooperate. Cooperate. That word echoed in my head like a gunshot. Cooperate meant shut up and take it. I did not. I stood there long enough for them to move on to other business trash pickup, Easter decor, sidewalk cracks. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh again. $38,000 in stolen materials being justified between discussions of tulip colors. When the meeting finally adjourned, I walked out slow, letting them feel the weight of my stare. In the parking lot, the night air cut through me like glass. A man caught up from behind, bald denim jacket, rough hands. Name is Jeremy, he said, lighting a cigarette. Used to live near your place before they annexed the edge? I nodded. You saw what they did. Did not have to. I have seen that woman pull this kind of stunt for years. You are not the first, just the first, who showed up. She ever get pushed back? Once. But they lawyered the guy into the ground. Most people do not have the stomach for it. Well, I said, watching smoke curl into the cold, I am not most people, Jeremy smiled. Then buckle up. That night, I parked the truck at the end of the lot and looked out over the gravel pad where the logs had been. The ground was scarred and empty. The wind off the lake was sharp enough to taste metal. I could almost see the cabin I had planned, the shape of the roof, the smell of fresh pine, the sound of rain hitting the porch, all of it stolen. But standing there, something settled inside me, the kind of calm that comes right before a man stops waiting for help and starts planning payback. They wanted to make me another silent casualty of paperwork. They were about to find out I build more than cabins. I build cases. And I do not fold. I did not sleep that night. The wind off the lake whistled through the cracked fence, carrying that hollow sound that only happens when something is missing, like the land itself was calling out what they had taken. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Karen's smug smile and that flatbed rolling away with my future stacked on it. I was not raised to pick fights, but I was raised to finish them. By dawn, I had a plan. If the law moved slow, I would make sure it tripped over the truth. I drove to the Gallatin County Sheriff's Office right when the doors opened. The same deputy from before waved me in coffee in hand. "Morning, Mr. Holmes," he said. "You got more info." Yeah, proof. And a reason to move faster. They sent out Detective Marla Kenny, maybe mid-40s, sharp eyes, hair tied back, tight no time for bullshit. She motioned me to sit. I did not. They broke into my land, stole $38,000 in timber, and left a letter calling it community service, I said. She did not blink. You got proof. I dropped the folder on her desk, like a judge slamming a gavel. Receipts, GPS logs, delivery slips, time-stamped photos, even the HOA's own letter admitting they took the lumber. She thumbed through the papers, her expression flattening into that quiet kind of disbelief you see in cops who have seen too much. They admitted it in writing. Right there, paragraph 3. Confiscated and reassigned for community improvement. Their words. She set the papers down and leaned back. That is not a civil dispute anymore. That is criminal misappropriation. Good, I said. Then file it, you just did. Her voice was calm, but I could tell she liked the fight in it. Step 2, legal firepower. By noon, I was sitting across from Julia Canwell, a property rights attorney with a reputation for skinning HOAs alive in court. Her office smelled like cedar and printer ink. She had a pile of case files on her desk and a look that could turn a lie into a confession. "So," she said, flipping through my evidence, "they seized your lumber, filed a fake environmental report, and are using the materials for their new pavilion." "Exactly." She smiled just barely. "Good. That is better for us." Julia worked like she was born for war. By sunset, we had filed a civil suit against Willow Bluff's HOA and Karen Stonewell, personally for unlawful conversion, trespass, and property damage. She even added loss of use and emotional distress because, as she put it, if they took your piece, they can pay for that too. Then came the big move, an emergency injunction to freeze construction on their so-called community pavilion. We served notice within 24 hours. I thought that would slow them down. It did not. Karen played dumb in public and bold in private, classic move. When I called the sheriff to check on enforcement, they said they were still coordinating jurisdiction. Translation, HOA politics. Meanwhile, the flatbeds kept rolling through Willow Bluffs, so I took it public. That night, I opened my laptop and went nuclear. Posted everything on a landowners forum, a construction subreddit, even a local Montana Facebook group. I did not embellish a word, just facts, photos, receipts, and one headline. HOA stole my $38,000 logs and claimed I stole their trees with receipts. By morning, it had gone viral. Hundreds of comments, shares, messages from strangers saying things like typical HOA tyranny and burn them in court. A Bozeman local blog picked it up. Architect claims HOA stole logs to build pavilion has receipts. I gave them an interview. Calm, steady voice. No drama, no anger, just truth, because truth has its own volume when you say it straight. They asked what I planned to do next. "Get my logs back," I said, "and make sure nobody else gets screwed by people who think paperwork equals ownership." The inbox filled fast. Former residents of Willow Bluffs messaged me. One said Karen fined him $5,000 for painting his shed non-compliant beige. Another said she had forced a family to move their fence 2 feet because of aesthetic harmony. A woman claimed she caught Karen taking photos through her window to verify landscaping standards. It was not a community, it was a cult with a budget, and now the cult leader had stolen from the wrong man. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. "Holmes, Detective Kenny again. Got an update for you," she said. "Mind if I stop by?" 20 minutes later, she pulled into my driveway dust, trailing behind her cruiser. She had a folder in her hand and a look that said she had seen something interesting. "We got documents from Willow Bluffs," she said, setting them on the hood of her car. Environmental violation report, photos, internal memo, all signed by Karen Stonewell. "Let me guess," I said. "Dated after they stole the logs." She nodded. "Looks that way." I flipped through the papers. Sloppy PDF printout. No county seal, no inspection code, just a few vague paragraphs about fresh-cut timber consistent with HOA protected slopes. I laughed. They wrote their own warrant. Kenny did not laugh. We are starting to suspect that too. She glanced at me. You said each log was stamped. Burn mark. Top of every beam. Perfect, she said. That is forensic now. I thought that would be the end of it until Julia called that evening. Brace yourself, she said. They are accelerating construction. What? They have ignored the injunction. Your logs are being used right now. Pavilion is half built. My pulse hit the roof. Then we get evidence. She paused. You sure you want to do that? I am past sure. 15 minutes later, I was parked half a mile from Willow Bluffs in a borrowed sedan with tinted windows. Beside me sat Kyle, an old buddy from my contracting days, used to do architectural photography before the housing crash. Now he freelanced and he owed me a favor. Still got that Nikon with the long lens, I asked. He smirked. You kidding? It is how I pay rent. We watched from the tree line as the crew worked, hammering, lifting, joking, completely unaware they were building with stolen goods. Through the lens, I could see everything. 12-foot lodgepole beams, my beams, cut notched, laid across prefab supports. On one end, burned clear as sunrise, my brand mark. Click, click, click. Photo after photo, proof in high resolution. I sent the pictures to Julia before the dust even settled. Within an hour, she had forwarded them to the sheriff and filed for emergency enforcement of the injunction. But I was not done. If Karen wanted to play environmental crusader, I would bring in a real one. That is how Ron Treadwell entered the story. 70 years old, gruff as barbed wire, a retired forestry expert with a handheld spectrometer and no patience for fools. He met me on my property the next morning, cigarette dangling clipboard under one arm. They said, your logs came from their slope, he asked. Yeah, the one I have never stepped foot on. He spat in the dirt. Figures. He knelt down near the gravel pad, running his thumb through the gouges in the earth. Tracked loader, he muttered. Not a pickup. Had forks, maybe a boom. Heavy duty. Then he looked up. And, for the record, those trees out there in Willow Bluffs. Red pine and fir. What you had were lodgepoles, high elevation, dry growth. Different species altogether. You can prove that. He grinned. Better. I can teach it to a jury. I liked him instantly. While Ron started drafting his report, Julia worked her legal magic. She subpoenaed Pine Valley Harvests, shipping logs, and geolocation data from their delivery trucks. Turns out they tracked everything. GPS pings every mile, timestamps from Kalispell to my gate. No detours, no mystery stops. The delivery route was clean as a ledger. That alone buried half of Karen's argument. But the next call, that one blew the whole case open. Jeremy showed up at my lot again, that same denim jacket, smoke in hand, smirk half hidden under his mustache. Got something for you, he said, handing me a flash drive. Should I ask where it came from? He shrugged. Better if you do not. Let us just say someone on the board is not happy with the Queen. The drive was a bomb. PDF exports of internal HOA Slack messages. Karen herself writing things like, we cannot let him build that cabin. He is flaunting his independence. Do not worry, we have already diverted the logs. They will look better as our new welcome center. Her son even chimed in, got the first shipment. Supervisor does not know the full story. Keep it that way. I sat there staring at the screen. No yelling, no punching the desk, just cold. That kind of cold that means the storm is coming, and someone is about to drown in it. Julia called it what it was. Congratulations, she said. You just moved from civil to criminal conspiracy. The next morning, the sheriff's office rolled into Willow Bluffs with a court order and 3 cruisers. Detective Kenny led the inspection personally. Every beam was measured, photographed, cataloged. Serial burns matched my delivery list exactly. Some even had my red spray-painted dots for corner placement. That was the nail. The rest was just hammering it down. Karen's whole environmental report turned out to be a sham. No county authorization, no survey, no credentials. Her committee consisted of 2 HOA members, 1 retired dental hygienist, and 1 guy who thought lichen was tree acne. Fraud, plain and simple. Julia started smiling again, that dangerous lawyer smile. We are not just suing anymore, she said. We are prosecuting. By the end of the week, the county prosecutor was involved. The case was public, now headlines, photos, interviews. Reporters called it the Pavilion Scandal, locals called it the Fall of Willow Bluffs, and me, I called it Step 3. Because the way I see it, revenge is not rage. It is patience with a target. And Karen had just painted a bullseye on her own back. When I walked into the courthouse that morning, the air smelled like paper, old coffee, and nerves. Reporters waited outside with cameras half raised, pretending they were not there for me. They were. The story had already spread across half the state. HOA president faces criminal charges in timber theft scandal. But headlines do not tell you what it feels like to see your life turned into evidence. Julia met me in the hallway suit, sharp hair tighter than her patience. "You ready?" she asked. "Been ready since they cut my gate." She smiled. "Good. Let us burn them clean." The courtroom was packed. Locals, ex-HOA members, curious neighbors who had come for blood or closure, it was hard to tell which. Karen Stonewell sat at the defendant's table like a statue carved from ice, her pearl necklace shining under the fluorescent lights. Two lawyers flanked her expensive defensive due. The judge, an older man with reading glasses perched halfway down his nose, shuffled through the case file. His sigh carried across the room. "Let us begin." Julia stood first. Her voice did not rise, it cut. "Your Honor, what we have here is not a zoning misunderstanding. It is theft, fraud, and trespass dressed up in paperwork." She held up the first exhibit, the invoice from Pine Valley Harvest, the company that delivered my logs. Stamped, signed, GPS, logged. Then she slid forward a second file delivery pings from the hauler's truck, showing the route straight from Kalispell to my land. No stops, no detours. The judge adjusted his glasses. "So far, seems straightforward." "Oh, it gets better," Julia said. She tapped the remote, and the projector lit up with photographs. High-resolution shots from Kyle's Nikon. The pavilion under construction beams laid out like ribs, each one marked with the brand I had burned into the ends myself. The judge leaned closer. "These markings match your delivery manifest." "Exactly," Julia said. "Every one of them." You could feel the room shift. Even the reporters stopped typing. Karen's lawyer stood next. Smooth voice, fake calm. "Your Honor, while the plaintiff's evidence is compelling, rural disputes like this often lack clarity. It is possible that the judge cut him off. Possible that that his branded logs teleported onto your construction site." A few chuckles rippled through the back rows. The lawyer flushed. "We believe Mr. Holmes' documentation could be fabricated." Julia smirked. "And your evidence. We have sworn statements from HOA board members. Any forestry reports, satellite data, witnesses?" Silence. Julia leaned in. "So just words." "Convenient, since that is all this whole association seems to run on." The judge banged his gavel once. "Counsel, keep it civil." Julia nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I am just emphasizing the difference between claims and proof." Then came the knockout. Julia clicked to the next slide, the Slack messages. Karen's own words glared across the courtroom wall in bold text. "We cannot let him build that cabin. He is flaunting his independence. Do not worry, we have already diverted the logs. They will look better as our new welcome center." The room went dead quiet. Even Karen's lawyers froze mid-breath. The judge looked up slowly. "Miss Stonewell, is this your account?" Karen's mouth opened, opened again. It appears to be her lawyer, whispered. Julia did not let up. "Your Honor, these messages were retrieved from Willow Bluff's internal communications provided by a whistleblower on the HOA board. Metadata confirms timestamps preceding the theft." She turned back to the crowd. "They did not just take the logs, they planned it. You could almost hear the nails being driven into the coffin." Detective Kenny took the stand next. Her badge caught the light, her tone was pure steel. She walked through every step, my report her, on-site inspection, the forensic match of log stamps, the internal memo Karen had fabricated. Then she dropped the last bomb. "During our investigation, we discovered an email exchange between Miss Stonewell and the construction firm building the pavilion. The email is dated 3 days before the theft report was filed." The courtroom murmured. In that email, Miss Stonewell confirmed delivery logistics for lumber she did not own. The judge looked like he had swallowed a lemon, so she coordinated the transport of stolen goods in advance. Yes, Your Honor. That is grand larceny and conspiracy, he said quietly. Karen's face stayed still, but her hands gripped the table so tight her knuckles turned white. During recess, I stepped outside into the spring air. Reporters swarmed microphones, flashing like gnats. I did not give them a soundbite. Jeremy was waiting by the steps, cigarette between his teeth, grin hiding under his beard. Hell of a show, he said. They have never seen an HOA case like this. I smirked. Good. Maybe they will think twice next time they send a letter with threats. He nodded toward the courthouse doors. You think she will do time? She is about to find out what accountability feels like. When we went back in, the defense tried to stall motions, objections, every cheap trick in the book. But the evidence kept stacking higher. The prosecutor entered Ron Treadwell's expert report into the record. The old forester himself testified calm and blunt. Trees from Willow Bluff slope are red pine. What was stolen were lodge poles from high, dry ridges. You can tell by the growth rings. You do not need a lab for that, just eyes that work. He turned to Karen. Anyone claiming they are the same either does not know wood or does not care about truth. Even the judge cracked a faint smile. Duly noted, Mr. Treadwell. The defense called no witnesses, just one closing plea about community misunderstanding. Julius' rebuttal cut that to pieces. This was not misunderstanding, it was arrogance. An organization that thought paperwork was stronger than property rights, that thought a woman with a clipboard could play God with other people's land. She gestured to me. Mr. Holmes did not ask for anything but justice. He documented everything, followed the law, and still they stole from him. Now they hide behind bylaws and bureaucracy. Her eyes locked on Karen. You called it community improvement. I call it organized theft. When Julia finished the room, did not breathe. The judge nodded once and recessed for deliberation. An hour later, he returned with the decision. His tone was quiet but sharp enough to cut glass. I have reviewed all submitted evidence and testimony, he said. This court finds Willow Bluff's Homeowners Association, under the direction of President Karen Stonewell, guilty of unlawful seizure, trespass, and misappropriation of property. Karen's jaw trembled. The judge continued, this court also finds sufficient evidence of fraudulent documentation, falsified environmental reporting, and intent to deceive both local authorities and community members. He paused, eyes locking on her. In plain terms, you stole something that was not yours and lied to everyone about it. I could feel every person in that courtroom exhale at once. The sentencing would come later, but everyone already knew where it was heading. The judge ordered the pavilion construction halted immediately. All remaining materials were to be seized and held as evidence. The HOA's accounts were frozen pending audit. As the bailiff read the order, Karen sat frozen, that fake composure cracking around the edges. Her son, the contractor, buried his face in his hands. I stood in the back silent. No gloating, no smile. Just that same cold I had felt the day I saw the empty gravel pad. Only this time it was melting. Outside, the world erupted. News crews shouted, questions, microphones shoved forward. Mr. Holmes, how does it feel to take down an HOA? Will you rebuild the cabin? I stopped, looked straight into one of the cameras, and said, only. They messed with the wrong property owner. That night, I sat by the lake with a beer and watched the stars burn over the water. Jeremy called. You did it, man. Karen's name is toast. State is talking prison time. Good, I said quietly, but deep down I was not celebrating. Winning does not always feel like victory. Sometimes it just feels like getting your life back piece by piece. The sound of the wind moving through the pines returned peaceful this time. For months, that sound had been anger. Now it was just home. 2 weeks later, Julia called. Verdict is final. Sentencing hearing in 10 days. You should be there. Would not miss it. She paused. You did good, Holmes. You fought back. Yeah, I said, but next time I would rather just build a cabin. The courthouse felt colder the day they read her sentence. Maybe it was the weather, or maybe it was the air leaving the room before impact. Either way, the whole place hummed with that low tension you get before a storm. Reporters lined the walls. Even the janitor paused mid-sweep to watch. Karen Stonewell sat at the defendant's table, pearls gone blazer, replaced by a gray jacket that hung loose around her shoulders. Her lawyers looked like they had aged 10 years in 3 weeks. Julia was beside me, calm as ice, hands folded like a gunslinger, waiting for the bell. The judge adjusted his glasses and began. After reviewing testimony, evidence, and the nature of the crimes committed, this court finds Miss Stonewell guilty on all counts: unlawful seizure, trespass, fraud, and criminal conspiracy. The room did not move. No coughs, no whispers, just the scratch of the clerk's pen. Miss Stonewell, the judge said, voice, even you are hereby sentenced to 6 years in state prison, eligible for parole after 4. You are also barred for life from serving on any administrative or homeowners board within the state of Montana. Karen did not flinch. She did not cry, did not beg. She just stared forward, jaw locked, like she could will the moment into something else. But the sound that followed, a gavel cracking wood, made it real. It echoed through the courtroom, like thunder rolling off the mountains. The judge was not done. The contracting company, operated by Miss Stonewell's son, is fined $180,000 for receipt and use of stolen property. Its state license is revoked, effective immediately. Across the aisle, her son buried his face in his hands. The man who once strutted around town in a new truck was suddenly very small. And the judge added his tone, almost gentle. Now the Willow Bluffs Homeowners Association is hereby dissolved by court order. All assets are to be frozen pending redistribution to impacted parties. That was it. The HOA, her empire of rules, fines, and arrogance, was gone. One strike of a gavel and years of suburban tyranny evaporated. When we walked out into the sunlight, the crowd waiting outside erupted in noise. Some cheered, some just stared, unsure if they had really witnessed the end of something that toxic. A reporter shoved a microphone toward me. "Mr. Holmes, any comment on the verdict?" I kept my voice level. She stole from me, lied about it, and built a monument to herself with what was not hers. Now she is facing the consequences. That was all I said. That was all that needed saying. I drove straight from the courthouse to Pine Valley Harvest. Same route as before, same truck, same empty space in the back where my dream had once been. The foreman met me out front. He had seen the story on the news. "Hell of a fight you picked," he said, shaking my hand. "You want the same order." "Exactly the same," I told him. "Let us finish what we started." 2 weeks later, the new shipment arrived. 30 logs, lodgepole, pine, straight and true. I watched the crew unload them like they were laying down foundation stones for something holy. This time, I did not just stand there. I worked alongside them, rolling, stacking, inspecting every cut. When the last log hit the gravel, I exhaled. It was not just timber anymore. It was redemption, 1 ton at a time. But I was not stupid. I had learned what people could do when greed met paperwork. So I hired a private security firm. Solar-powered cameras, motion sensors, 24-hour monitoring, the kind of setup that would make Fort Knox jealous. And I added something else. A dog. Karma. Half shepherd, half mystery, all attitude. Big brown eyes, mean bark slept under the platform where the new logs rested. She did not trust anyone at first, but she took to me fast. Guess she could smell a man who had lost enough. Construction started in late June. I worked from sunrise to sunset alone most days, sometimes with help from real neighbors, people who did not care about bylaws or approved color palettes. One guy, Tom, brought beer and stayed to help raise the ridge beam. Another lent me scaffolding. A woman from down the road showed up with homemade pie and stories about how the HOA once fined her for leaving a garden hose out. Without Karen's shadow looming, folks started acting human again. No threats, no fines, no folded letters slid under doors, just people helping people. By August, the cabin's frame stood tall against the sky, every joint tight, every beam leveled, every board sealed like a promise. It was not a mansion, it was honest. Wood, sweat, and freedom. One afternoon, Julia stopped by unannounced. She stood in the doorway of the half-built cabin, sunglasses pushed up, taking it all in. "You actually did it," she said. "Did not have a choice," I replied, handing her a coffee. She sipped, nodded. "Feels different without them breathing down your neck, does it not?" "Yeah, quiet is a lot louder when it is earned." She smirked and handed me an envelope. Inside was her final invoice. On top, a sticky note in her handwriting. "You won! Make it count!" I pinned it to a post above the workbench. The first frost came early that year. By September, the roof was finished, the floors sanded smooth, and the smell of fresh pine filled every corner. I mounted the wood-burning stove myself, then built the stone hearth around it with rock I had hauled from the creek bed. Each piece fit like it had been waiting for me. When it was done, I stood back and looked at what I had built. A cabin, sure, but more than that, a line drawn in the dirt, proof that they could not break me. But I was not done. There was one final piece. A message. I took one of the leftover beams from the second delivery, the kind with the same burn mark I had branded into the first batch, and mounted it above the fireplace. Then I heated up my wood-burning iron until it glowed red, and carved the words slow and deliberate, each letter biting into the grain. Not every HOA knows who they are messing with. When I stepped back, the letters smoked for a second before cooling into black scars. I laughed quiet and real. Karma barked once from the porch like she agreed. 2 weeks later, I threw a housewarming party. No permits, no board meetings, no dress code, just real people. Jeremy brought whiskey, Tom brought ribs. Even one of the former HOA members showed up, pie in hand, eyes down. "Karen never let me bake for the community," she said. I smiled and handed her a beer. "Welcome to freedom." We ate, laughed, swapped stories about small battles won and lost. Someone strummed a guitar while the fire cracked low. The stars came out in full, reflecting off the lake like they were celebrating too. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was not angry, was not fighting, just living. As the night thinned out, I sat on the porch steps with Karma's head resting on my knee. The lake was a mirror again, still silver, forgiving. You would never guess it had been a battlefield not long ago. I thought about everything, the fight, the court, the noise, and realized something simple. Justice is not loud. It is quiet, like a saw, cutting straight through clean wood. The kind of sound you only hear when the work is finally done.